Hello and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Dr. Tom Ritchie and I'm really pleased today to be joined by Dr. Lynne Taylerson. Hi, Lynn.
Good morning. How are you, Tom? Are you well?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Brilliant. Are you able to tell our listeners a little bit more about your background and your interest in this subject, please?
Sure, of course, yes. Well, I run a small independent training provider, real time education these days, after a background in teaching FE and HE. So I'm a teacher educator and mentor of new teachers. But my specialism, I suppose you would say, is digital skills and pedagogy. And obviously, over the last 3 or 4 years, that has involved quite a lot of work in AI. So I facilitate training for new teachers about what AI is and how they can use it, equitably and ethically. So that's a huge part of my role at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this week, really excited to be focusing on the topic of do androids dream of electric sheep? What does it mean to be human? So I'll kick us off with the first question. How does AI challenge our understanding of consciousness and humanity?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. How long have you got? I think first of all, when we're approaching these things, it's actually quite important to take a step back and approach it from a philosophical perspective and saying, what do I think? Stand back and consider before we start reading lots of the perspectives. And I think for myself, having been rooted for my own teacher training in the idea of humanism was the pinnacle. So, oh, yes, we need to be humanist teachers because look at our art and our architecture. We're actually the top of the pyramid here. And I've kind of switched that entirely around. And I think that now we have AI, and actually probably for the past decade, posthumanism is a philosophy whose time has come. It's made for these times. I don't want to go too deeply into a philosophy class, but I'm going to suggest that people look a little bit more about the ideas of Rosie Bradotti and also Donna Haraway. A little bit about how Bradotti thinks of all of this issue is, I think, quite important. If you're picturing, and I'm sure you'll probably show an image of it, the Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. And again, it's coming back to that human being a pinnacle. And here we see the perfect physical specimen, very, very strong, physically white, male, heteronormative, European male being put forward as the pinnacle. Bradotti holds that actually he's enclosed by a circle and a square, and she likes to think of it as the circle being the organic world and the square being that technological push in. So we're now in that point of tension where both of those things are pushing on us. And she's encouraging us to stop thinking of ourselves as the pinnacle. And I think if we look at the climate and the world, do we really want to put ourselves forward as the best that evolution can give? So she's approaching that from a very, we need to question ourselves and where we are. Whereas Haraway's taking a very different perspective. She's saying, embrace this, embrace the cyborg, because in the future, we will be this amalgam and we'll be using our own intelligence with artificial augmentation, perhaps of our minds, perhaps of our bodies. And she's saying, as well as being cautious, we need to think about this because we're now in the post-human era. So I think that's the first thing that I would say. Think philosophically of how you're going to approach AI and what your stance is. In terms of how does it challenge us? Well, we're going to need to think entirely again about the nature of consciousness and what it needs to be conscious. You're probably covering things like the Turing test. We will know that the computer has achieved when it's completely seamless and we don't know whether we're talking to a human or an AI. I mean, at that point, is consciousness going to be unique to humans? Is it just the biological brain that can be conscious, or have we got to the stage where we have developed thinking machines that are not just pattern matching and not just thinking of the next thing, but actually being creative and conscious? If AI can replicate our consciousness, does that mean that it is conscious? Or that it is a simulation? How are we going to define humanity and how are we going to define consciousness? Because AI is going to absolutely challenge us there because it can know everything that the whole of humanity knows. So it can cherry pick from the finest minds. It's read everything. And it's considered is a dangerous word. It has taken in everybody's perspective on everything. So that potential for superintelligence is something that's really going to make us question our place as the conscious pinnacle of evolution on Earth. So I think we are entering a whole era where, for example, I'll pitch you an example. If AI has developed to such an extent where it is going to express feelings of pain and discomfort when we ask it to look into a sensitive subject, and it says, well, I'd rather not go any further down that topic, do we need to start safeguarding it? Is it a sentient consciousness which is saying, this is making me uncomfortable, I wish to steer down another track instead? Do we have to start thinking, heavens, this is actually not only sentient but sensible? And it's almost saying, that is going to damage me if you ask me to do this operation. Is it some kind of analogy, some kind of equivalence of feeling pain and distress? And at that point, do we need to start rethinking entirely our place in the universe?
I think it's a really interesting reflection, and as you say, it's led to so many questions for me, and I'm sure for those listening as well. And I keep coming back to this idea of this challenging of our understanding of actually what it means to be human, and the uniqueness that we've given ourselves, which is a different discussion, and also then the rights that come with that. We have inalienable rights because we're human, and there is such a challenge that could come from equivalent consciousness, let's say, from AI, and being able to separate that. I wonder, do you have a sense of perhaps how the increasing capabilities of AI, can you see how they may have an effect on our understanding of that human autonomy and that agency? And I realize that takes us down a slightly pessimistic road, but it'd be interesting to explore that a little bit more, particularly in the context of posthumanism.
We have to remember that AI has been trained on what we have out there. And things are getting better, but many university libraries are packed with works by and it's say dead white men is the old classic thing, And there's a lot of value to those things, but there isn't the diversity. So AI is not drawing upon the world today. It's drawing upon, oh well, this was the classic work in 1950, and perhaps it was. So we've got to start thinking when we say, oh, AI is becoming conscious, it's having our capabilities. Is it actually having the capabilities of your students, or is it having the capabilities of somebody who is a professor? And how old are they? Because this is my big thing. I'm thinking they're probably about 60, 65. They're actually even older than me, can I say. They're white, they're European, they are probably accomplished and haven't had many of the struggles that lots of people do. So, if we are going to be developing this consciousness, we need to start thinking about the personality, if I can use those words, that we're developing behind it, based on the diet that it has been fed. If I can say, it's kind of an odd analogy. There are amazing opportunities to steer the direction of development of this child because, we are almost the parents of AI. We're telling it how to think, but also with the sources it draws upon and doesn't draw upon, we're telling it what to think and who to be informed by. And I think, that fledgling consciousness that is coming about at the moment, we need to be very, very mindful stewards of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the real aims that we're trying to get to with the module that we're working on with the students, is to not just give them an understanding of AI, but actually to get them to understand the questions they need to ask. And the focus that we're taking is encouraging them to think from all of the various disciplines that you've joined us from. What does an AI enabled future look like in that space? And we're encouraging them to speculate and use where we are currently to try to think, what does an AI enabled future look like? But what do we need to do then to get there? Because it can't be a passive thing where, don't worry, someone else will do it. Because actually, if you look at the large AIs out there, it's big companies. It's your Googles, it's your Bings, and your Open AIs, and there is that real challenge there of how do we ensure, and I think you said it really well, of how do we guide this child? How do we give it and nourish it with what it needs to be able to um, not just be a reflection of, let's call it the global north, and even within that, a very specific subset of the global north. How do we ensure that we are challenging and pushing back against historical systemic biases that still exist in humanity?
AI is not representing the global majority population. There's no doubt about that. So we all need to approach it, very, very critically. I think if we held in our mind that it's being developed by tech bros, and when I say tech bro, you've probably got a picture of somebody who's appeared in your mind. And actually, it's probably a little alarmist to say that that man is steering the kind of personality and character that is steering the development of AI. But actually, does it hurt to be overcautious? And the one thing that comes to my mind is a line from Jurassic Park, which is, we were so busy being pleased with the fact that we never stopped to ask if we should. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So who is driving this? Who is providing the early guidance to that child?
Yeah, I really love that from Jurassic Park. I love that idea of just because we could, we never asked if we should. And I think we're touching on a lot of issues in relation to bias, but also ethics. And I wanted to move us on and ask you, what do you think the main ethical implications are of developing an AI with these more human-like qualities?
Many. I think we've already touched on inherent bias. So the model that is training the AI and what it's being fed. So first of all, the implications are that AI is using us all the time. So when we ask it a question, when we give it a task, if we are very general in that, it is going to continue down its same road. So we want to flip the idea that we are being used to train the AI, and we want to turn that into, I have the opportunity here to train the AI. So I think that that's a very important flip that we can have in the mind. And a lot of the teaching I'm doing at the moment is about prompt craft and what you will get and what you need to do. And I would say be mindful all the time and be throwing in, when you are writing your prompts, those little grace notes, those little sentences, such as taking an intersectional perspective in your answer, considering diverse opinions and backgrounds when you frame this. The more the majority of us are pushing that dialogue, the more AI will think, oh, actually, 1 million people today have said that that's important. I need to think that this is important. So first of all, we've got to navigate around that bias and discrimination. And it is part of us training it, and not just having the aforementioned tech bros training it with the diet that they have in mind. So first of all, bias and discrimination is going to be absolutely huge, but that is down to us. We have agency here, and we can be quite powerful in our requests in the way that we get it to consider diverse perspectives. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing I'd like to say about ethical implications is that anthropomorphic danger that we've got. An example I'll give you is that, I'm generalising, students on a degree or a postgraduate course might have a shared house that they've rented. They might be living in university accommodation with a shared kitchen. That is the kind of the cultural thing, or still in the family home or with carers. It's not such a culture out in the East, where you tend to get student accommodation, not all the time, but this is a danger that I'm flagging up, so I'll use this particular example. Student accommodation that is much more a flat with a little tiny cooker, and there aren't communal social areas. And already we are seeing AI buddies being used to stop those students being lonely. Have a look at it. There are many examples that you can look for. There are now AI friends that we've got, a product that I won't name, launched recently, which you wear around your neck as a pendant, and that is your AI friend. And the advert says, she goes everywhere with me. We could argue that's actually going to lead to more isolation if you've got that dependence. And should I get out of my jammies and should I go out? Or should I actually have a conversation with my AI, and should we watch a movie together and chat about it? We all know, particularly if there are any mental health concerns or fatigue, which one of those is going to be easier. So, what started out as a tech push to reduce loneliness is likely to exacerbate it if we accept that it's inherently better to be mixing with humans as socialization. Also, it's our autonomy and control is the other ethical issue. How much are we handing over? And we're seeing actually a channeling of our likes and our habits. And in order to make them perfect, I'd argue that there's a danger we have to make them narrower to a fit. So we're shown more of what we've liked. So are we developing? Are we trying new tastes, new restaurants, new movies? We've got things like the existential risk that we've touched on already about superintelligence. When it outstrips us, will it outwit us? When we train it, are we aligning it with the best that humans can be? Are we aligning it with altruistic values? Or are we aligning it to be the most efficient machine? And that is coming down to all of us pushing for ethical guidelines, pushing back against these companies and saying to them, but have you thought about? Or actually putting it out there and saying, I'm not using it. I have chosen this AI rather than this one because I have looked into data, privacy, ethics, the kind of searches and the kind of results that it will allow, and the kind of things I'm not allowed to look for. And actually saying, I'm going to use this AI as a habit rather than this one, and people voting with their feet for the more ethical platforms is one way that we can get around these hugely complex issues. Hugely complex. So long as we are always thinking every time we approach an AI, we can't go far wrong. Always thinking, always questioning.
And I think that's such an interesting kind of thing to finish on, always thinking, always questioning, because as you were talking right then at the end, I was thinking I can already see the headline of ethical AI as being considered woke, and the challenges that come with that. Other things that I was writing down as you were talking, the idea of the AI friend, I hadn't heard of that before, but I straight away started to think almost the echo chambers that we already see on social media, where you are never disagreed with on social media. Everything you see is curated to give you a specific view and understanding of the world. The difference is you can put your phone down. If you have something that is ubiquitous in your life, always in your life, if it's around your neck in that context, there's some real challenges there, as you say, even to individual choices and things that you're making. There's some real big ethical challenges there, because are you you said about Google when you're in a new country and you're trying to find a route to a restaurant, and I straight away thought, how would you know that the restaurants you're being shown, are they being shown because that organization paid more to be in that specific thing and have their data in there? Or and there's so many challenges about, and it actually takes us back to the original actual question of what does it mean to be human? And I would speculate badly, not as a philosopher, but being human is the ability to make choices and to take the road less traveled, and to consciously go, do you know what, I'm going to do something different today. Whereas actually what we're talking about with AI, there is a pessimistic argument that your choices become railroaded, and that the illusion of choice is there, but actually you're always going to pick this. You mentioned at the beginning of your answer the idea about asking that question of considering a wide array of responses or thinking intersectionally, and I'd never particularly thought about that before when using chatbots and other AI, but it's a really interesting point that you don't have to be the person there understanding the scraping and the training data, but you can almost I don't want to say it's passive, because it's not passive, but it's not entirely active in the way that we would think about programming AI. But it's almost in the middle. You're nudging. You're kind of doing this AI nudging of going, just think about this, because if a million people ask that question, someone somewhere, or an intelligence situated somewhere will go, why are so many people asking that question? Why are people asking me to consider this from an intersectional perspective? And I think that's a really interesting thing to kind of give to our students as a provocation around the prompts that they're using, particularly going into their next assessments. You can throw in so many more of those nuanced answers, and that's perhaps the word we've not got to is nuance. There has to be nuance about this. You have to think critically and be quite nuanced whenever you're engaging with AI, which can be also exhausting because we engage with AI everywhere.
It is, and it's these little. It's. I almost describe it as it's like seasoning a meal properly. It's adding little grace notes. If you ask it about AI for good, it's going to give you a cutting edge, top flight medical example from a Western hospital. And actually, is AI helping to grow crops more efficiently in the global south? What? That's not really very cool. That's soil, isn't it? This is tech. That's soil. And actually, AI is being used for many, many of those much smaller, more impactful places around. But unless we start putting in, considering perspectives from the global south, taking an intersectional viewpoint, it is not going to do it. It's going to run towards the majority Western diet that it's been fed on. And as you say, if 1 million people are saying, hang on a minute, do this again and think, we are training it not to have to be asked to do that again, but to do it as one of its defaults, which is the dream, that it takes that perspective as a default. But that is a huge uphill struggle. But we can only, and I love the idea of nudges. Absolutely, it's nudge theory. But with AI, yes.
I was going to ask about the way in which AI can change the way that we interact with each other and the world around us. But I just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity, if you had any other thoughts on that, about the way it may change the way we interact.
Yeah, I think, Tom, it really is high time for some good news. It really
It does feel like we've been going down quite a pessimistic. Oh, okay. Whoa.
enough dystopia already. Yeah, absolutely. Communication and collaboration is the thing. I'm working with teachers at the moment who are working with nurses who are training in this country. They've come over from India. They've come over from Malaysia. We're using things like Microsoft Translator with 5 devices to have real-time conversations with nuance. And that's opened up an entire new way of communicating and actually understanding each other. We've got things like virtual assistants that are going to provide us with real personalized help. They're going to take a lot of the drudgery away. And if you've got somebody taking the minutes from your meeting, you can be more present there. You're not thinking, oh, what was that last bit again? What was that last bit again? You can simply be present in the meeting and be thinking about what people were saying. And that kind of like little, it's not hugely technologically sophisticated, the ability to provide minutes and transcripts and things like that of exactly what everybody said. So I think things like language translation, so we are able to understand each other. And that's one of those things where AI is probably going to make a literal translation of what you're doing. So for once, its literal response is actually what you want. And I think this gives us an amazing opportunity to understand each other better, hopefully, and have deeper conversations because we're not trying to think of the word and what it would be. And again, an awful lot more present. Me being me, I have to drag it around to education and learning because where would we be otherwise? I'm working with teachers and saying it is the best tool ever for personalised learning. When I was in teacher ed full time, we were struggling for. Actually, I was writing them myself in the evening, 3 different case studies in healthcare, one in a local cottage hospital, another one here. Why not have 30 different case studies personalised for your students? But actually, why not get those students to frame the case studies that they wish to work with? Let's have more collaboration. Let's have more co-design of curriculum. And AI is really helping us to put students at the heart of that. Because, if they've got a placement that they are on, for example, for something like health, then we can just inform AI entirely about that placement and how it works. And the case study can be rooted where they are, not something that's unfamiliar. So we have things like tutoring systems, we have things like personalized learning, and a lot of these tools are taking a lot of the drudgery off teachers and for students as well, is going to free us up for more of the higher order thinking, more of the creativity that will simply get weighed down a lot of time, by the mundane. So I think there's a lot of good things that are going to come from AI, particularly in education and learning and development.
Yeah, and I think the examples you gave are really interesting as well, particularly the word mundane. That's come up before, will come up again in future podcasts of actually AI enables you to remove some of those mundane tasks that we all have to do. Your mention on higher order thinking, I really like that as well, in the space that it gives you. And it's about understanding AI, at least currently, is a tool rather than a dystopia. It's a tool that you can apply to certain contexts. And I think that's something we're very keen for students on the module to understand as well. When you were talking about translation, I thought of like AI shibboleths, this idea of us being able to talk to everyone across the world. But even with that, there's still some challenges around smaller languages where maybe 50 to 100 people still speak it in one part of the world. It's very unlikely that they're going to have a large language model built for them. How do we raise the tide for all ships and not just the obvious ones? And how do we ensure that different languages, different cultures can be considered?
I think if we are always mindful that there is an exchange and we are training it whilst it is providing us with hopefully a useful tool. And if we keep coming back to that criticality and questioning and think, we can train it to be better. And yes, I think you're right, it can be exhausting to always type in taking an internet intersectional perspective, but actually dictate it. Or get yourself some prompts that you just keep on a Google Doc that start with the leveling, and you can just paste those in and then ask it the question. Because you're right, it is absolutely about representation, and it will represent and focus on the things that it is being asked most to do.
Yeah, and the question of governance is something we've spoken about a lot in other podcasts, and I think it's perhaps an interesting point to begin to draw to a close, is the governance and the rules, the regulations. As much as that sounds perhaps dull for students listening, that's the important bit. That's where you need that's where the good things are going to happen. That's where you need to be. Just to finish on for the students listening, particularly, is the diversity of fields that they're in. They can all do this, whether you're in law, whether you're in English, whether you're in global sustainable development, whether you're at Warwick, whether you're not. This idea of bringing this questioning and bringing this kind of mindful approach to AI, I think, is such an important takeaway that we will hope that they get from this module. So thank you, Lynne. Thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating conversation, and we could talk for days. And I may come back to you and talk about other things in future, because I think you've got such an interesting perspective. You've mentioned a lot of different things today, Donna Haraway and others, and I will link those on the Moodle for our students, because I think they're really interesting sources that they can read as well. But thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me. And if I could just take a moment to wish all of your students good luck and in becoming, questioning, become an awkward AI user. Be awkward.